The Genesis, the Miss America of Alternate Cryptocurrencies. Written by Daniel M. Ryan. Originally posted on EnterStageRight.com. September 27, 2013. That was the day when a mysterious fellow with the username BCNext signed up for Bitcoin talk. The next day, he posted an announcement that would change the direction of cryptocurrencies forever. The announcement was for a cryptocurrency which he called Nxt. Not only was it to be coded from scratch, but it was also to be coded in a language that was completely different from the standard C++. Nxt was to be programmed in Java. Moreover, Nxt had a new wallet system called a brain wallet. The typical cryptocurrency has a file in the user's computer, typically named wallet.dat. The brain wallet system, in contradistinction, has no definite file in which the Nxt holder's coins are stored. They're essentially stored in the databases of all the peers, so there's no explicit file target for a hacker to copy. In addition to this security model, the brain wallet emulates Java's write once, run anywhere philosophy. With a Nxt brain wallet, you can deposit once, access anywhere. But back then, in late September of 2013, Nxt had not even been developed. Some Bitcoin Talk members, seeing or suffering from the scams afoot in the IPO circuit, decided that there would only be one robbery. That robbery would be of the naifs who sent BCNext some Bitcoin, and the robber would be none other than BCNext. Yes, during the pre-sale phase, which actually lasted until November 18th, there were more than a few Bitcoin Talk members who decided that Nxt was a plain scam. Joining them were more than a few scoffers, and some rather clever people who opined that BCNext would send the Bitcoin he collected on a round trip, so as to make his pre-sale seem more popular than it was, and to get a big stake in Nxt for himself. But some people believed in BCNext and his vision for a completely new cryptocurrency, with proof-of-stake forging to secure the network, registerable aliases, instant messages, completely new infrastructure, and an inbuilt asset exchange. That asset exchange would capture the holy grail of the crypto world, so-called colored coins that could be used to represent an outside asset. 73 of those believers became the initial stakeholders of Nxt. BCNext raised 21 Bitcoins from them. The Genesis block that would create all the NXT was to contain 1 billion new coins. When the pre-sale was closed a few hours after midnight Eastern Time on November 18th, only 99 accounts were entitled to receive NXT. One Bitcoin Talk member, arguably, had the pre-sale window slammed shut on his fingers. His complaints, plus a simmering under-the-surface hostility in Bitcoin Talk that had been aggravated by the sudden riches and steaminess of altcoin boomtown, would prove to be a fateful course changer in the entire alternate cryptocurrency world. It didn't help that BCNext decided to vanish and communicate to his stakeholders via a spokesman named Come From Beyond. The last time BCNext visited Bitcoin Talk under that username was November 8, 2013. Since then, he has communicated indirectly. The reason, so he said, was because he was afraid of being tracked down by the CIA or such like because they would believe that he had developed a new Silk Road. He later revealed indirectly that he was involved in crypto under another name, and he hinted that he might be back someday under yet another username with a completely different project. Despite his conspiratorial-minded exit statement, the parallel with Bitcoin's original developer Satoshi Nakamoto was quite evident. His supporters and fans found it easy to believe that he was in the same rank as Satoshi Nakamoto. Some even wondered if he was Satoshi Nakamoto. The unimpressed, naturally, didn't think anything of the sort. They were inclined to make far less flattering comparisons. In BCNext's last message, he said that Nxt would be released in early January. In actuality, he generated the blockchain starting Genesis block less than 36 hours after he halted the pre-sale. And a little later, on November 20th, Come From Beyond unveiled the web address of a Bootstrap node that stakeholders could use to access their allocations of Nxt. The unveiling proceeded to be a little more complicated because some stakeholders did not supply valid identification or even identify themselves at all. So the earlier Genesis block was voided and a new one was regenerated. In the meantime, in the early afternoon of November 20th, Come From Beyond offered to sell 1 million NXT for 1 Bitcoin, or 100 Satoshis per NXT. Someone else quoted a price 10 times higher. That got 2 complaints. One was somewhat easygoing, about Come From Beyond quoting a price that was, in actuality, almost 50 times what he paid. In response, Come From Beyond said that 100 Satoshis would prove to be a real bargain by late January of 2014. Another early adopter, Too Cool for School, averred the same thing. Too Cool for School was evidently quite convincing. 35 minutes after his endorsement, Come From Beyond rescinded the offer. No one complained heatedly, but that Genesis offer did show, perhaps unintentionally, a somewhat mercenary attitude. On the other hand, there were seeds of generosity sprouting too. One IPO stakeholder said he was going to give away 1,000 NXT to his friends, and Come From Beyond pledged to set up a faucet, a website where a visitor could get a small allocation of free coins. Faucets were nothing new. Bitcoin had had them for a long time, but it did show a side in the earliest adopter community that was the opposite of rapacious. Within a day, another first adopter, Near.g, pledged to donate 4 million of his NXT to a giveaway fund. But before the pledge, another IPOer offered 1 million of his own for that same 1 Bitcoin. Showing that he was serious, Too Cool for School quickly offered to buy them all. NXT at 0.00001 Bitcoin? 100 Satoshis is an investment I can't afford to miss. And he meant what he said. On November 21st, mid-afternoon Eastern Time, yet another first adopter named Notiv posted, "I'm selling 15 million NXT to Too Cool for School for 15 Bitcoin. Since there's no client yet, I'll need an escrow." Soon after that, Too Cool for School confirmed that he would be sending his 15 Bitcoin to an escrower. The Genesis exchange had taken place only a half a week after the pre-sale had been closed. On late afternoon of the 21st, Come From Beyond explained the reason for the hurry-up. BC Next wanted the core group of Nexters to run things in his stead, but because of the advance in schedule, the first version of Next would only be basic. The entrancing features in his original proposal would be disabled for a long time. Anyone lurking in the thread, wondering if something was fishy with Next, had another item to add to the fishiness list. At that time, though, no one piped up. In retrospect, even though the most likely motive was BC Next deciding to remove himself from the scrutiny of the authorities that he thought were watching him, his decision was a stroke of managerial genius. By being the leader who refuses to lead, by being the sleeping king, BC Next left a vacuum that was soon filled by a whole crew of really solid programmer talent. One of them, Jean-Luc at Bitcoin Talk, and Jean-Luc Picard in the Next neighborhood, became the official chief developer for Next, and the maintainer of the official Next repository on Bitbucket. As of the time of this writing, there's a whole confederacy of developers for Next. They're all hard at work extending its functionality and are providing third-party services overlaying Next itself. Some have gone beyond even BC Next vision. Of course, with respect to that master stroke, there was some luck involved. The leader who refuses to lead can create a vacuum that's filled by indecision and infighting, as seems to be the case with Gen 2 Linux. But BC Next vision provided a rallying touchstone. And to be frank, he was lucky that he had captivated top-notch talent. After the new Genesis block was pruned of unidentified or unidentifiable stakeholders, Come From Beyond announced late morning Eastern Time, November 22nd, that it was time for the remaining stakeholders to claim their coins. The pruned Genesis block allocated 49,875,751 NXT for the maximum 1 Bitcoin investment for an implied price of about 2.005 Satoshis per NXT. Remember, there already was a formal commitment by 2 parties, both the seller and the buyer, to exchange 15 million NXT at almost 50 times the pre-sale price. Without anyone quite knowing it at the time, a real fuse had been lit. Even though the buyer, the aforementioned Too Cool for School, was an openly eager demander of 15 million more than his initial IPO stake, at that price, only a slight hint of the fuse now inaudibly hissing came from the seller Notiv, who suggested to his committed buyer, "Be sure not to hog them all. They'll go up more and be better if you distribute them to a lot of people." Just a cautionary note expressed in a casual and even friendly tone. A cautionary note posted at supper time Eastern Time on November 22, 2013. Any newbie lurking at that time would see nothing more than a reminder about the need for wider distribution. Nothing more than that. The jubilation on late November 22nd was mixed with confusion and some fright. Come From Beyond reminded everyone that BC Next had posted a link to a desktop NXT client on October 29th. Although it was recommended that the IPO recipients register their accounts at the Bootstrap web client set up by Come From Beyond. That registration was part of a procedure for each stakeholder to claim his or her coins. In the final iteration, the step-by-step instructions comprised 12 full steps. Come From Beyond had to explain the procedure for running a Nxt, Nxt Clone, or Nxt Offshoot wallet. Fire up the client, then necessitating opening up a command prompt window, changing its directories to the NXT files folder, and typing in java-cp nxt.zip nxt, and then opening up a new browser window. Once the command prompt part of the wallet had been fully booted up and signaled that Nxt was running, the user had to put the address http://localhost:7875 in the open browser. The browser, after getting the user's passphrase, would open up the interactive JavaScript wallet. Or at least that's the way it should have worked. After one eager IPOer started up the command line client and got the message NXT 0.1.5 started, his client started throwing exception errors. Come From Beyond had to advise, "Your version's not compatible with mine. Use it to just generate an account ID, and later we will all get the most recent version." It's not hard to imagine curious altcoin vet lurkers in the thread starting to snicker. Yet another launch, yet another messy launch, yet another launch where the groundbreaking tech goes haywire. But this mess included something new, having to straighten out clashes between different and network incompatible versions of the clients. BC Next expressed a real distaste for cloners, heartily seconded by his growing circle of core Nexters. So he announced through Come From Beyond that Nxt source code would remain secret until early January, more or less the same date as his originally promised release. The next version that entered crypto history as the first with the source code proved to be 0.4.7. Jean-Luc Picard, for his historical reasons, still offers it for download. But the code, now open source, was not exactly clonable for real. Again, through Come From Beyond, BC Next explained that he deliberately introduced 3 subtle but serious security flaws in the source code for 0.4.7. Those flaws would be revealed in 3 months' time if no one had found them by then. Come From Beyond shrewdly made a contest out of it. The discoverer of flaw number 1 would win 1,000 NXT. For the discoverer of flaw number 2, 10,000 NXT. For the diligent and insightful discoverer of flaw number 3, 100,000 NXT. This announcement spawned a Bitcoin Talk thread that ended up growing to 69 pages and got a lot of Bitcoin Talk members poking through the source code and getting an inadvertent self-education on how Nxt innards worked. Some of these people would take their learning and join the high-powered developer community now comprised of well over 20 developers. As for the rewards, they were all claimed before the contest was over and in order. More than a month passed when the only one still open was the frustratingly subtle flaw number 3. The winner? Evel Knievel got awarded the bounty on March 22nd, 12 days before the contest was to end and the flaws revealed. After fielding a fair number of questions and help requests, Come From Beyond announced that Nxt Network would be fully operational as of noon GMT November 24th. And then he went back to fielding questions and help requests, and noting that Nxt required more than 256 megabytes of memory allocated to the Java runtime environment, else it would have a habit of crashing. He also included a pre-warning with a list of account numbers that would be sent next come go time. He told those first adopters to check their details carefully because once Nxt was a go, the sends would be irreversible. Less than an hour and a half later, the first hint of the hissing fuse surfaced in a somewhat angry complaint from one of the IPO stakeholders. Unlike most of the others, he had not followed the progress of Nxt. He said that claiming what was his had become a lot more complicated than what BC Nxt had originally promised. That's pretty much work for an investment of less than $100. Little did he know, not having followed the thread, that at the first trade price of 100 Satoshis, his less than $100 already had an implied value of 4 figures. As launch time approached, Come From Beyond was still busy fielding help requests after help requests. Some of the lurkers in the thread were obviously less than charmed by the seeming donkey derby. Shortly after go time, the first criticism threads appeared, claiming that Nxt was flawed, rickety, and with unplanned security vulnerabilities. Ironically, that stroke of genius, Sleeping King talent drive was already on the job. By early January, 5 different wallet clients were available. But those complaints, numerous as they were truly weak sauce to the fury that exploded over a completely different issue. Nxt was not just the pioneer of completely Bitcoin-independent second-generation cryptocurrencies. It was also the pioneer through being the #1 punching bag for an outpouring of economic populism that shot through the ostensibly libertarian altcoin world. Completely unintentionally and only as the #1 plutocrat villain, Nxt also induced a serious flirtation with cryptocurrency socialism. The first one-shot trading price of 100 Satoshis served as a precedent for the first phase of price discovery in Nxt's official trading thread. That precedent price was also close to the starting price of trading on the first day Nxt was listed on its first real exchange, DGEX. That day being November 29, 2013. It was at that point that the lit fuse entered the dynamite sticks. But the explosion didn't come until November had turned into December, the month where DGEX price discovery revealed that Nxt had become another get-rich-quick altcoin. December 25, 2013 was a holly-jolly Christmas for the original still-holding stakeholders who paid an implied price of only 2.005 Satoshis for their NXT. On December 25th at 12 a.m., NXT traded at 7,884 Satoshis for more than a 393,000% gain in Bitcoin terms in 3 months or less. A hypothetical punter who bought 1 Bitcoin for $250 on Halloween 2013 and threw it into NXT shortly afterwards could, only conceivably, have sold his stake on the beginning of Christmas morning for more than 3,900 Bitcoins, and then, more realistically, turn around and unload that 3,900 Bitcoin for US dollars for more than $700 per Bitcoin. Had this impossibly lucky person done precisely that, said luck-struck fellow would have turned that $250 into approximately $2.73 million. For the first time in crypto history, a hot alt had made at least one lucky holder an outright millionaire on one single starter Bitcoin. For the first time in cryptocurrency history, an alt posted a percent gain that was in the range of Bitcoin itself, but in a jarringly compressed time frame. What took Bitcoin 3 full years to rack up, Nxt racked up in 3 months. Even more strikingly, NXT's subsequent performance was more or less a wide-ranging side channel. Nxt had pretty much held its value after its boomtown stampede ended. A buyer of NXT on December 25th had lots of chance to exit with either a teeny profit or greater. The canny developer recruitment tactics and the check out the innards publicity stunt secured enough top talent to keep Nxt innovations churning out more or less continually. BC Nxt's original vision has mostly been realized, and several side services have been added that haven't even been dreamed of. Yes, it's admittedly true, there were a few days in late November when Nxt could have justifiably been dubbed Klutzarella, but as the subsequent 8 months demonstrated, particularly in the months where NXT held most of its value, Nxt is the altcoin world's answer to Miss America. Indeed, for the original stakeholders who held, and even for the early buyers who relieved the selling stakeholders of their NXT at almost 50 bagger in Bitcoin terms, Christmas 2013 was a very Merry Christmas. Too cool for school, that eager IPO participant who bought 15 million more at 50 times his IPO price had been bang on right in his forecast. But for the ones who'd missed out, there she was, Miss Nxterica. By her mere presence, she had unintentionally elicited a very unhappy and soon-to-be rancorous new year.
This audio excerpt is sponsored by the Nxt Foundation. Thank you for listening. This has been the Genesis chapter from Snapshot Nxt, Unsurpassable Blockchain Solutions by Nxter Magazine, originally published November 2016. To order the full book and get special bonuses, go to nxter.org/snapshot1. That's nxter.org/snapshot1. And welcome to the Nxt Blockchain.